I've had Rich's back since the first day he came here, over 20 years ago.
Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. So today, we'll be telling you some of the darkest secrets behind the filming of hardcore porn. Now, when hardcore porn started airing, it was apparent to everyone that it was a rip-off of the Porn Stars show. Porn stars were doing so well that it would be unthinkable for a different to recreate the success and revenue that the porn stars were bringing in. So that is exactly what True TV did. Whilst it did it okay, it was never really about the porning of items. It was more about the feuds that the family got themselves and others into. And if we're being really honest with you, we only watched it to see if there'd be a fight in that show or not.
I'm watching you and Bobby J talk to these two girls. You're out there trying to sweet talk them, trying to bullshit with them. They end up walking out the front door. I'm looking for you in layaway. Where the hell are you?
Now, the family and everyone associated with the business state that it is all completely unscripted. But no one has that many arguments and fall out over exactly the same thing every week. Also, have you noticed that they are forever wearing the same clothes? Well, they do that on purpose. It's for continuity purposes, so if they record something over the space of a few days, it can seem like it was all done on the same day. So those who say it isn't somewhat scripted are clearly deluded on this one. Another unknown secret: did you know that one of the customers was once killed after being on the show? We didn't either, but after reading several newspapers about the incident, it was kept on the down low quite well. The man named David, who once appeared on the show, was trying to intimidate Seth and was killed by police a few years later. Although David acted a bit like a nut on hardcore porn, his girlfriend said the whole thing was all an act, which is kind of odd, considering it's been said that the whole show is unscripted. Either way, it was a bit of a tragedy. The police were called because of a domestic disturbance, and David refused to comply with their orders. This led the police to taser him repeatedly, and he died. Whilst this obviously has nothing really to do with the show, it does raise one question: is the show really unscripted or not? Because this guy sure seemed crazy on the show. Another reason to suspect that the show is scripted is that Aaron Paul wandered in off the street trying to find a particular item that they didn't happen to have or were willing to find for him. One wouldn't think that a lot of celebrities would wind up at a pawn shop in Detroit, whether it was on television or not, and you know what, if you actually think that, then you'd be right. It pretty much never happens. Well, except for when Aaron Paul showed up, of course. The star of Breaking Bad once visited the shop looking for a particular item. He didn't find it, but it's still pretty cool that Aaron Paul was there. Although at this point the show is so successful that the Golds might actually be more famous than he is. Of course, that's a joke. Aaron Paul is the man and is still a big star, but it's still pretty cool that he showed up at a famous pawn shop in Detroit. Now, another thing that drives us crazy when we watch it: Seth actually thinks that pawn shops help society. Now, I suppose that it makes sense that they think pawn shops are good for society, since they actually own a pawn shop. But either way, it's not true. Seth Gold says that pawn shops are a viable alternative to banks, and says that people still have things like birthdays and anniversaries because of pawn shops. He doesn't add the other part though, like what happens after the birthday. Sure, a guy gets to buy a nice present for his girlfriend by selling his guitar, but at the end of the day, the guy is still poor and won't have his guitar anymore either. With all that said, if you're in a business like owning a pawn shop, you probably have to engage in some pretty creative thinking not to feel bad about yourself.
The next person that up is going to be fired. You put me in a position that you were the next to go.